Is it 5? It is 5. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to KindSoup for the Soul. Thank you so much for joining us. And Carol and Susan in particular, thank you so much for what I'm sure is going to be a heartwarming KindSoup. So really appreciate your being here and leading us in making your mom's favorite soup. It's a very special occasion for all of us, really, and I hope we get a chance to hear some stories about your amazing mom. And for everyone else on the call and those of you who are new, just a very quick introduction to KindWorks and to this project. We are a nonprofit organization based here in the DC area, where many of us are tuning in from. We've been around for 13 years, and our mission is to make it easy for people to volunteer and to give back to their communities. And we do that by doing all of the legwork in terms of arranging a range of projects, whatever your interest, whatever your passion. We have something that I think will interest you in terms of giving back to the community. So we do various things. And before COVID, it involved things like setting up apartments for refugee families, mentoring inmates at the local jail, cooking food with recovered items, things left over from Whole Foods and other grocery stores and restaurants, using those nutritious, healthy items to make meals for men and women at the homeless shelter. And during the pandemic, we pivoted to try and continue to give back when the need was even greater than ever, and to continue to nurture a sense of community when we all are seeking that so much as we've been isolated in our homes. So KindSoup evolved. It was a great idea that Deb had, and the idea is to meet as we are in our kitchens, to connect via Zoom with people across the country, and to cook soup together. And we make a huge pot of soup. We've been doing this for 3 or 4 months now. I think we've had 20 different sessions, 20 different kinds of soups. Each session is led by one of us or by a guest chef. And we make a big pot, enough to feed our families, and lots extra that we can share with shelters and with food banks, with our neighbors, and with just people who may need a little pick-me-up, because that's what soup provides all of us. And it was so wonderful. Deb, if I can share, Deb was on her Nextdoor, which the app that many of us be on, that's sort of a neighborhood or a neighborhood listserv. And she saw that somebody had written on there that she was suffering from COVID, was feeling sick, sad, lonely. And Deb wrote back and said, "I've got soup. I've just made soup and would love to bring it by." And that neighbor replied that that's exactly what I need. And so, this connection was made virtually, through just this exchange that happened this morning. And so I think that really sums up what this project and really the ethos of KindWorks is about. We do what we can to help each other out and to build that sense of community. It's not about the numbers. I mean, we've certainly shared thousands of quarts of soup, but it's really about this one-on-one exchange. And we try and capture these moments through our storytelling on Facebook and social media. So please do join us there. It's at Do KindWorks. Our website is www.dokindworks.org. We'd love to have you join us. And I just want to introduce Carol, who's a long-time Kind worker. I think from the very beginning when we started off as Mover Moms. She's a dear friend of ours and just an amazing person who's done so much in the community through KindWorks and through her other work. And so nice to meet Susan, her sister. Welcome. And I'll let you, Carol, just and Susan, introduce a little bit about this session and why it is so special to you and to all of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Salma, so much. I'm really so touched by your comments, and it is an honor and a privilege for us to be doing this in memory of our mom. we lost her just last month, and really
Carol,
almost.
Carol, could we see you?
I'm sorry, I was showing my soup, but I'll show you.
Okay.
She, as those of you who know, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, but those of you who know her know that my mom was inspiring in so many, many ways. The people in her circle, her family, her friends, and the way she did that most beautifully and touchingly was through cooking. And so this just seemed like such a wonderful way to honor her and to share who she was. So we're delighted to do this today. If you haven't yet, there are two things I wanted to say that you can start to do before we get going. And one is to put your broth in your pot, which I have here on the stove. I've just put my broth in, and just start it sort of getting to a rolling simmer before we begin. And then the other thing is, for those of you who plan to freeze especially, you might want to get the water out of your tofu. And it's completely fine if you've already cut the tofu, because I know some of you did prep beforehand. You can still get the water out. I hope, can you all see this little setup I have here? It's 2 plates with something heavy on top of it. And that, if you just do that and let it sit for 10 minutes while we chat here, that will release the water. Make sure you use a plate big enough to contain the water, otherwise you'll just get a mess on your counter. And then you can throw out the water, and then that way the tofu stays more firm, and especially if you're going to be freezing it, it keeps the tofu, when it's reheated again, from having these rivulets of sort of frozen, icy, slushy stuff in it. So it's a good thing to do. And again, you can do it when the tofu is still in blocks, or you can do it if you've already cut it, whatever is easier. Just put something heavy on. When Susan and I were preparing for this, we sort of lovingly recalled that my mother, another one of her favorite dishes that actually came through her mother-in-law, my dad's mother, was a German cucumber salad, where you always had to you salted the cucumbers, and then you had to press them for a long time to get the water out of the cucumbers. So she did this all the time with that recipe. And she always put this really heavy can opener that we had on our kitchen counter on top. So I don't have a can opener like that. I use a manual one, but if you have an electric can opener, that will be particularly appropriate to use, because that's what Marianne would have used if she were here with us cooking. One more thing I want to do, and then I'm going to turn it over to Susan, but I want to give a shout out to my mom's Tasters group. I know Kay Ward, her dear, dear friend from LA, is here with us, who is part of that Tasters group. And my mom participated in this group for years. It was a group where they got together and had to make a new recipe every time they got together. So the idea was there was no blame or embarrassment.
Shame.
Just trying, no shame, right? You were trying something new. So, and Deb had the great idea that we should do, in memory of my mom, maybe a tasters club here at some point, which would be wonderful. But Kay is with us. I see Stefano here, a dear friend of my mother, is with us. So many people from so many different cities, my sister's friends. We have someone from Colorado. We have people, my sister will know better all of that group, but it's just very touching and heartwarming that you've all joined us. And so let me turn it over to Susan.
Well, I also want to just mention a few exceptional people that are here. Charlene Pollier, who is joining us from LA. I hope you can hear me, right? Charlene is one of my mother's oldest friends, and she can tell you some stories about Carol and I from when we were little. Charlene and her husband used to watch us sometimes when our parents went away. My father did a lot of traveling, and we were not the most kind siblings to each other. And poor Charlene had to put up with us fighting all the time. So I would love for her to say something at some point about us as we were little, because this is an accomplishment that Carol and I are together in the kitchen and getting along so well. So hello, Charlene, and my friends. I'll just introduce Judy Young and Leslie Isaacs is from Colorado. Judy is from Delaware County, where I am. Francis Sheehan, I see you, thank you. Debbie Tarkin, who I've already mentioned, and I know Lauren is trying to get on. She was having trouble finding the Zoom, but I'm not sure if she's here yet. And my niece Marissa, and Cheryl, our friend from LA, who was so helpful to my mother when she was ill and before she was ill, and Cheryl's daughter. And I'll let and Stefano, all of you, thank you so much for coming. I'm not a big talker, so I was planning to just cook. I didn't have anything prepared. So I'll get, I guess, to the soup. Carol, you might want to just do it as well. I just dumped all my broth in a pot. I have never made soup in this quantity before. The soup idea was one that appealed to me, and the last time I watched my niece Marissa lead us in a recipe, but didn't actually make it. So I'm wondering if I have enough room in this pot for all the soup. So I have another pot here. And this recipe is extremely easy and forgiving. You can do anything you want with it. You could pour half of it into another pot if it's getting too big. That's what I may have to do. I also will say that even though it looks like you have a ton of vegetables, I don't know if you can see all of this, but you know, these are my mushrooms. And then, you know, there's tons of the cabbage and spinach, but it all kind of dissolves into the soup as you're cooking it. So it isn't as big as it looks. For those of you who are making a half a recipe, that's great. You will still have plenty of soup, probably too much soup. So give it to friends or people that you know who would appreciate it. So I'm just going to start heating this up. I don't know if any of you are already way ahead of me. I
have one question, Susan or Carol.
Sure.
The Napa cabbage, is that something particular? Like, is it different from your regular cabbage?
You know what? My mother's recipe did not have that. I will admit I added that. And I like it because it's very, very light. And no, you could use regular cabbage. You could also just leave it out. As I said, it wasn't even in the recipe. I started putting it in honestly because when I make the soup, I make a Chinese meal, and I often make dumplings for the meal. And I could never figure out what to do with the leftover cabbage after I made the dumplings. And one day I just threw it in the soup, and it was delicious. And it also gave more body to the soup. So that's why the cabbage is in the soup. Truthfully, I haven't made it with regular cabbage myself, but I think it would be absolutely fine. So would bok choy, if you happen to have that left over, or kale, or pretty much anything that's a vegetable that gets soft in hot water. So regular cabbage would be great, I'm sure.
Could I ask a question as well?
Sure.
When I went to Costco, I got tofu, and I'm not a tofu expert by any means. And I didn't realize there's firm and extra firm, and they only had firm, and that's what I got. Does that matter?
That's fine.
I actually always buy the firmest I can find, just because I think in soup it might get a little mushy. So firm is perfect. Extra firm is fine too. Today I found super firm. I don't know what the difference between super firm and extra firm are, and they only had one of each. So I bought one of each, and we'll see how it goes. But
and what size package are you getting of the tofu? Because there's all different sizes.
I know, I'm so sorry. I thought when I first made this recipe that the tofu packages were 16 ounces. Now I just bought them today, and they are 12 ounces. And my friend Judy tells me she found an 8-ounce package, and I also saw one today of 8 ounces. So again, I think it really depends on how much you like tofu. Whatever you bought will be fine. You don't need a ton of it. A lot of people don't even like it, so you could leave it out, or you can just, I used to just add a 16-ounce package, but I don't know if they've just made only smaller portions of that now. So for this recipe, I actually bought 3 packages of tofu because I love the tofu. It gives the soup more protein, more body, makes it more of a meal rather than just a first course. So that's what I do with the tofu. Any other questions? Oh, Francis, let's see. To everyone, not more vinegar, more soup. I don't understand. Francis, unmute yourself.
No, I was having an interchange with Joyce Martin. I said there definitely needs to put more vinegar in, and Joyce wanted to know how much, so I told her. And then, but when I said that my husband wanted more soup, I said wants more by mistake, and I wanted to clarify that it was more soup, not more vinegar. The
Oh,
problem is I don't want to give him more soap because then I have nothing to donate.
Oh, okay.
Don't let your partner anywhere near your kitchen. The soup is really good.
Wait, can I ask a question?
In terms of slicing up the cabbage and stuff, you can do it any way you want. I left some unsliced just in case anybody wanted to see what I do, but this is what it looks like already sliced up. And I just take off the little ends kind of like that before I start slicing it. If you didn't do that,
We can't see what you're slicing.
Oh,
Camera's not down there.
okay. Hold on 1 second and I'll try to hold the computer in one hand while I am doing this. No, this is not going to work. Let me try something else.
There you go. That's good. Susan, if you're talking as you're doing it, we can't hear you.
Someone asked if the white part of the cabbage goes in or not.
Everything, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Other than the very edge that's a little rough. I throw out the bigger hunk at the end. So it looks like this.
So do we put our cabbage in with the broth?
Yeah,
Yes.
just dump it in with the broth and then
Uh-huh.
dump in, and the spinach. Interesting thing, I always try to find triple wash spinach so I don't have to worry about it. And today I couldn't find anything that said triple wash. So I rinsed my spinach already, and I'm just gonna literally sit here and dump the cabbage into the soup. I'm gonna get you back in a minute on the.
And what temperature is the soup supposed to be on? Is it a boil or a simmer?
I'm gonna boil it eventually. So whatever, I just have it right now on medium high, kind of getting
Okay.
hot.
Okay.
It only has to cook until the vegetables soften up, which if you're making a normal amount of soup is about 3 to 4 minutes. But with this volume, I've never made this in such a volume before, so I can't tell you. I'm gonna kind of gauge it as I'm doing it. Carol, feel free to chime in yourself if you make it too.
Yeah, you're doing great. I just want to add, for those of you with dogs, this part of the cabbage that you're not going to put in, your dog will love it. Cut it up in bite-sized pieces and give it to him or her as a treat. Very healthy, but watch out, you'll get a little bit of a liquidy poop next time, but it's worth it. And also I was noticing Susan's Napa cabbage, just to show you that how they come in different flavors and sizes. I'm holding mine up. Mine was more round, like a lettuce when I bought it, or like a regular green cabbage that you would buy. But it is a Napa cabbage. It has this like crinkly stuff you can see. So they do come in different shapes and sizes, and it's all good. One of the reasons we picked this soup, my mom had many favorite soups, but this one is really a forgiving recipe. So Another, and also for anyone who has a favorite mom story about a nourishing item that their mother loved to make and that you grew up loving to make, please feel free to share. One of the stories I wanted to share about our mother is that she did so much cooking, and she also, I mean, she worked full time, and she, even when she retired, was always really busy. So she was often doing things on the fly and at the last minute. And she, you know, had some flops, as we all do. And one of the great lessons that she taught us is there's really no such thing in the kitchen as a total flop. If you're making a cake and it doesn't harden the way it should, it's a compote, and you made compote. And so she just always had a way of taking the failures and turning them into successes. And so that, you know, that was really a life lesson for Susan and me that I would like to hope we carry into the future, and that we have taught our children that, you know, they're sometimes the things that seem most disastrous or turn out to be quite unexpectedly wonderful. So thank you, Mom.
May I
Here's
ask
to Mom.
a soup question, please? So I've got my vegetables in, and I'm so glad you mentioned the bok choy, because it was in the back of the refrigerator. It was left over from last week, and I thought, oh, I'll put that in, and then I completely forgot about it. So thank you. But I have two types of mushrooms, and I have spinach, and I have napa, and I have bok choy, and it looks to me like there's not enough liquid in there. I haven't put the tofu in yet, right?
Okay, then we can, that is something that I have found. That's why I actually, the original recipe was for, excuse me, 4 cups of liquid with a quarter of all the vegetables that Carol mentioned in her thing. And so, yeah, you'll see, first of all, as we boil all of this, I don't know how far you are, if you've already boiled it and everything's soft, but the vegetables will kind of dissolve into the soup. So you may find that you have enough liquid. If you don't, add water. Just add some water or extra broth. But the vegetables get so soft and kind of dissolve in that's what I've always done. But it won't hurt to add water or vegetable broth or more extra broth. You'll just end up with more soup.
Thanks. I'll wait a couple of minutes until I see how they soften up.
Like not adding the spinach now, that just usually, and again, if it looks like too much, leave out some of the vegetables and use them for something else. But generally, it works out. I know it looks like a lot.
Okay.
I want to see if I can turn the floor over for a minute to our dear friend Cheryl, because Cheryl spent a lot of time in my mother's home having meals. And as Cheryl will know, my mother, Cheryl is vegan, and my mother is always wanting to please and to nurture, but sometimes has a hard time, as she did when I became vegetarian, with people's diets when she's not necessarily in sync with it. And Cheryl, you may have some comments that you want to make about that, but always the loving and always the nurturing. She learned to adapt even to Cheryl's needs, and I think would have like half-hour conversations with you about what you could and could not have before she made you dinner.
As I've said before, she was the nicest person that thought I was crazy. She was always so supportive, so kind, so caring. And whenever, you know, she wanted to meet us for dinner, where you pick the place, all good. And then she tried to cook without. I was going to ask you about the soup. So it calls for 2 eggs. And of course, I don't eat eggs. So I have my flack egg replacement, but I'm wondering what it would be like without the egg, you know, which is
just leave it. You could leave it out. The thing that the egg does, if any of you have had egg drop soup in a Chinese restaurant, that's what the egg is for. And with all the vegetables and everything else that's in there, you probably won't notice it. It does thicken the soup when you make it originally and you're not using all these vegetables. Then again, it adds protein and makes it more of a meal, but not necessary. I would just leave it out.
Yeah, some of my earliest memories of your mother, Carol, were when I was literally 17, 18, 19, and I'd come to your house on Beverly Drive for a meal. And your mother would always be cooking and baking, and everything was homemade and beautiful and busy, but still giggling. You know, she had this lovely sort of giggle about her. And even though I know the feeling, because obviously I've done some entertaining myself, you're stressed, you're worried, your mother would just keep stirring and giggling and scampering about to make sure everybody was happy. And she really did love entertaining and having people over and cooking wonderful food. And yeah, and I never ate enough for her. She was always trying to give me more. She always said, you must want more. That can't be enough. That was always true.
Carol, I'll just add that Ron's favorite place to go for dinner was Marianne's. She was just so generous and kind to us. And my favorite dish, and she taught me, was the appetizer with the mushrooms, and she'd stuff the cheese in it. And she taught me to do those.
Yeah, that's a great one. If you ever want a quick appetizer, just buy some mushrooms and stuff them with boursin cheese.
Right.
Delicious. And stick them in the toaster oven for 5 minutes. She was full of really great, quick things to do, because she always loved to cook and loved to entertain, but, you know, wasn't always home all day cooking. So, yeah.
Carol, when would she make this particular soup? Is this, what are your memories of this soup? And what are some of your favorite things that Mom used to make?
Well, she, like Susan, she made this a lot with China, like a whole Chinese food dinner. But the great thing about this soup, and one of the reasons we thought of it for this KindWorks project, is that it's so quick. I mean, when you're making as much of it as we are, it takes a little more time to soften the vegetables. But you know, you could really do it so quickly. And the other great thing about it is that it's got the protein from the tofu, but it's not, you know, it fits, you can pretty much adjust it to all different sorts of diets. So it's a very accommodating dish, you know, as like Cheryl will leave out the egg drop, and that's fine. This will taste great just as a vegetable tofu soup, you know, and it would be fine if you were not putting in as many vegetables and wanted to make it more of a true sort of Chinese egg drop type soup that didn't have a lot of vegetables. So it's a very flexible recipe. But
do you have any favorite meals or things that your mom used to make, something that you replicate as well?
So many. So and the other thing is, my mom really knew sort of everyone's individual favorites. Like when I would come home in the years when I was, you know, at college but coming home a lot, or in law school coming home a lot, she would always make apple betty, which was just one of my favorites. It's a dessert that is it's a little bit like an apple crisp, but it's got raisins and cinnamon and like a breadcrumb type topping. And I've really never, I mean, it's not the kind of dessert you get in restaurants or at other people's homes, but when I think about my mother, apple betty is sort of one of those things that no one else ever made it for me, just my mother. So it's very special memory for me. I don't know, Susan, do you want to add some things?
Yes, I will say, my mother made a version of Eggs Benedict, and it was not really like the kind of Eggs Benedict you get if you went to a fancy restaurant. She did not bother with hollandaise sauce. She just made a cheese sauce out of cheddar cheese and milk, just making a white sauce and basically adding cheddar cheese and cayenne pepper. And so that was our favorite breakfast. And one year, my daughter Nicole got stuck in Dallas, Texas for about 5 days. She actually never left the airport, on her way, hopefully to see us in Cabo, but she never really made it because there was an ice storm in Dallas. And anyway, they finally got a flight out of Texas. They couldn't get to Mexico. They went to LA instead. And my mother rescued my daughter Nicole and her good friend and who was actually from Australia of all things, and took them home, and she wanted to do something nice, and she said, should I take you out to a nice restaurant? And Nicole's only comment was, no, just make me Eggs Benedict. And so we have pictures of Nicole after the ice storm. My mother made her and her friend Eggs Benedict. So Nicole today now makes Eggs Benedict as her comfort food. She asked me if I wanted it for my birthday this year, and I actually deferred to something else. I can't remember what, but that's a special thing. And it's not like anybody else's Eggs Benedict because it doesn't have any lemon in it, but it's a lovely recipe for a breakfast with English muffins and ham and eggs and cheese. So not for the kosher people here, but one of my.
You can make it without the ham. I never put the ham in, and it's delicious. And when she would make it for me, she'd leave the ham out. So it's even somewhat traditional.
I use avocado instead of any kind of meat.
Oh,
yeah, great idea.
Great. Hey, Leslie, it's so good to see you. Thank you. And I'm just going to say one thing about my soup over here with, I used what my sister's multiplication came up with, which was 4 cartons of, 32-ounce soup. And I put in all these vegetables and I actually fit it all in this one pot. And I think I have enough liquid. I don't know if anybody else is noticing that, but I'm okay here.
Yeah, mine just cooked down and I was skeptical, but it looks, and I have to say, I don't think I was authorized to do so, but I tasted it and it's already so delicious.
Oh, you are authorized. Anyone, please go ahead and taste.
I haven't even gotten, it doesn't taste like anything until you.
No, it's so good. I went a little bit ahead. Susan, I have a question for you from Megan. She only had enough soy for half of what she's making. Do you or anyone else know if she can use cocoa aminos for the other amount of soy that she doesn't have?
You know what? I have no idea. I am very bad. My sister should answer that question because she is the ace at substituting. And we have
Carol?
It's just that I run out of stuff probably because I'm not organized. You have I don't know that item that you.
Yeah, I think it usually can be.
You can. I just talked to. I was at Trader Joe's looking for tamari, and they said
tamari will work. Yeah.
You can use coconut amino.
Oh, okay. Megan, did you hear that?
I was going to suggest tamari. So if it's like tamari, then it's totally fine.
Well, it has no coconut flavor. They say it. A lot of people say. My daughter, my husband said you could do it, and the guy at Trader Joe's. So
thank you. That's very helpful. Great.
That's what I'm doing. I ran out of. Well, I actually have soy sauce, but I figured I'd try it on this.
Yeah, why not?
And Salma
asked a question about the vinegar also. Is the cider vinegar apple cider vinegar?
Yes.
Or is there different? Yeah.
Yes, apple cider vinegar is fine.
Thank you.
I don't know if anyone has any other cider vinegar. I'd love to hear because I don't know.
No, right. I'm not aware, but I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yes.
Carol, did you want to mention anything about the cornstarch slurry?
Oh, yes, thank you, Cheryl. So for those of you freezing your soup, I did some Googling about freezing, and the tofu will be fine, especially if you took the water out. The egg even should be fine. What may not be fine is the cornstarch slurry. We haven't gotten to talking about this yet, but at the point in the recipe where you mix cornstarch with water and add that in, apparently once it's defrosted, it gets like gelatinous and a funny texture. So again, I would just leave that out. If you're planning to freeze for a food hub, or for any other reason, whatever part you're planning to freeze or the whole thing, just leave out the cornstarch and the water. You do not need it.
I think that the cornstarch is such a thickening agent. It's not going to thicken the soup too much.
It will thicken it, which is what you want to do. I mean, that's the way the soup normally is. It's a little thicker than, say, a broth texture. But again, if you've added a lot of vegetables, that's why I don't even think you'll need it thickened. And you certainly don't want it thickened if you're going to freeze it, because it just will get this funny texture. So yeah, you can completely leave out the cornstarch. If you are used to very thin broth-based soups, then totally leave it out. Otherwise, it'll just make it a little richer, a little thicker, as you said, Cheryl. And by the way, for those of you who were getting the water out of your tofu, it's been long enough now. You can take it off. You should have a nice little flood of water at the bottom of your plate, and then just throw that out. So I'm finding my stuff, I probably put in a lot of vegetables, but my stuff is still boiling down. I don't know if most of you are beyond that already. But if so, then go ahead and add, the chili oil and the cornstarch if you're doing it in the cider vinegar, and voila. I mean, again, the beauty of this,
I will just say aside, I know the recipe on the website has the soy sauce at the bottom. What I generally do is I put all the things like the soy sauce, the vinegar, the chili oil if you're using it, the pepper, and the sesame oil in a bowl, in a separate bowl, and I add it all at one time. I don't know why that was the original recipe, so that's just the way I'm doing it. And I'm not going to even do that until the soup really boils. Mine has not boiled yet. It definitely has a nice, now enough water to look like soup rather than just vegetables, but it hasn't quite boiled yet. So I wait till it boils to add that stuff. If you have not, it's not a problem. If you want to add things one at a time, that's fine too. I just wanted to tell you why I was doing it this way. I usually just put and then I play with it at the end anyway. So.
I just wanted to ask Marissa and Julia if you'd like to share any memories of your favorite foods that Grandma made you.
I can say something. It wasn't gonna be food related, but I just wanted to say I think how happy my grandma would have been to participate in this event. She was sort of sick as the Zoom era took off, so she wasn't fully up to date on the best practices of Zoom. But if she had been, I mean, she just would have loved this so much, and she would have been asking all of the very detailed questions. She was a recipe follower, as forgiving as she was, and I think just would have been so curious to hear about how everyone was approaching it, and just really delighted to hear about the community that was created here and to be a part of it. And so I don't know, it feels like a part of her is kind of here right now, because she just would have loved this truly so much, and would have loved all of you, even the ones she didn't know. I mean, sorry, last thing, but my grandma was just strangers became family immediately. And so just being on this call with you would have made you her friend and her family. And I know she would have really relished her time with each and every one of you. So.
And she would have loved that. She would have loved that Carol and Susan did this. Susan and Carol, thank you. And she was so proud of you, Marissa, with your food blog. She told us all about that. And Julia, she loved when you came to visit, of all of you. Thank you.
Marissa, is there something that your grandmother would say? Did she have a turn of phrase or something that was unique to her? A word or? Yeah,
that's such a good question. Julia, did you have something you thought of?
No, that's a great question.
I love that question.
On the food related end, although I would love to keep thinking about if there is more of an expression, but there were certain menu items that she was very consistent in ordering whenever they showed up. So one was she had seasonal cocktails. So she would do a bourbon and soda in the winter and a gin and tonic in the warmer months. And then she just had these favorite menu items that whenever they showed up, she would always order. A lot of them had to do with meat, which I think was one of the reasons why it was very difficult for her when my mom first became vegetarian, but she of course got used to it. But the patty melt is one that I always remember, as well as what's it called? Beef tartare I feel like those were the classics.
I thought it was great. It's not like so specific to her, but I do think at sometimes she would say, "That's wonderful," and it was just like kind of an expression. I'm curious if that's any of my.
Cheryl also has made, I mean, many beautiful tributes to my grandmother, but I remember she recalled that, you know, my grandmother was an incredibly accepting person, and she just had this way of, if you brought up something that you were doing that she might not approve of or that she didn't really understand, she sort of said like, okay, it's fine, okay, fine. And it was the most loving version of that. I mean, it wasn't dismissive, but it was sort of like, I don't really understand what you're doing, but I love you anyway, and that's okay.
Yes, that is absolutely true. And that happened many times, as I shared. She was just very, very loving. And she had this giggle. I'll never forget her giggle, her laugh and her giggle. It was sort of a, I don't know, it was a chuckle. It was a deep chuckle that she'd do a lot, whether she was comfortable, uncomfortable, just sort of all the time. And yeah, and then she always wanted to bring you into her world too. So if you like her financial group, I don't know if anyone's on here, but she'd always say, you know, I know you work, but boy, wouldn't you love this? Or, you know, she was always thinking about ways. Danielle's her Play-Doh. Would Danielle like to take a class at Play-Doh? Or, you know, just being very warm and welcoming to many of the things she enjoyed. And, you know, I'm watching Carol and Susan cook there, and you guys don't realize, I mean, maybe you do realize how comfortable you are for all these years in the kitchen. I mean, Carol, I can't be around you without you cooking. I show up and we don't go out, you know, you cook. And I got some of that cooking knowledge from you, that love translated, and not everybody cooks that way and loves that way. It's very unique and very, very special.
I want to say a word about Marianne also for all the people who've become grandmothers or one day will become grandmothers. She was incredible. I mean, the energy level, of course, that she had was incredible. But beyond that, she would fly from LA to DC on a Friday to be here for Marissa or Julia's performance on Saturday, and then fly home on Sunday and do it the next weekend, or go to Philly for Susan's kids' performance or whatever. Like, she was just back and forth, like, yeah, just pop in for the weekend, take a red eye, never missed a beat. I mean, it's just incredible. She was an amazing woman.
I just want to say thank you to everybody. This is so touching and so beautiful, and for us to hear. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, from all of these memories.
I know also, just to echo what my sister said, that my grandma would be so appreciative that this is happening in conjunction of a good deed, you know, for the world too, and something that's in the home and the kitchen, and the space that obviously she loves so much. And so I really appreciate being able to be a part of this. Thank you, guys.
The last thing I do want to point out that Marianne actually participated just a few months ago in one of our racial justice kind work discussions. And Susan, I think you were there also. So you all have been part of our kind work family for a long time. So thank you.
If other people with mothers, who I think means all of us, have stories they would like to share about their mothers and nurturing memories, please join in, because that would be lovely. And my mother would have loved that too.
I would love to. First, I just want to say this has been such a beautiful way to spend time together, and making new friends and getting to know your mom, Carol and Susan. She sounds like she was an incredible woman, and you've learned so much from her. And it's wonderful to hear these stories. Even though I didn't meet her, I feel like I know her a little bit. So thank you for that. I'll just share about my mom, who's with me, which I lost my dad 2 years ago. In fact, next week it'll be 2 years exactly. My mom lives in New Jersey, and she's an amazing cook. Not so much soup, but she makes traditional Pakistani dishes. That's where I'm from. And there's one in particular, which is my all-time favorite. It's called tomato gosh, which is tomato meat curry. Usually you use goat or lamb meat to make it. And she still makes it for me to this day, although, you know, her health is not great. I don't want her to be cooking so much and just spend more time on looking after herself. But when I do get to visit her on occasion, she would have made a tomato gosh for me, and she would have frozen it. And before I leave to drive back home, she will give it to me. And just last night, I was missing her so much and really hungry. And I found her tomato gosh in my freezer. And I will tell you, it tasted even more delicious than I could remember, because, you know, it's the memory and it's the thought, and it's, yeah, just being able to taste something that tastes so good because mom made it.
I'd like to share a Marianne food story that is still very, very much present in our mind. And you know, as we were saying with Carol and Susan and others, the peculiarity of Marianne was that not only we were hanging out with our friends, in this case, Carol and David, but we also hanging out with Carol and David and their parents and Marianne. And even more, we would hang out with Marianne even without our friends, and especially when we were in California. And we had just arrived in the United States a few years, and we were staying at Marianne in LA. And in the morning, she asked us, what would you like for breakfast? Do you like egg Benedict? And I had no idea what egg Benedict were, you know, never had them before, not typically what you eat for breakfast in Italy, just have a cup of coffee. And I said, like, sure, you know, I eat everything, so I'm sure I would have liked that. And she made this delicious eggs Benedict. And since then, they were so good, they became my very favorite breakfast. And it is by far my favorite breakfast. And so every time I have eggs Benedict, you know, I think of Marianne. So there are lots of food stories with Marianne, because when we met, there were always some gorgeous meals involved, either at her place or at Carol's or at the restaurant, wherever. But the egg Benedicts is really my food association with Marianne. I love it, and so that's great. I also want to point out that I am the only Y chromosome, it looks like, in the whole group, and it doesn't really make a difference because the Y chromosome is absolutely pathetic chromosome. It's so small. It's like teeny, and it's empty. There are like very few genes in there, so it doesn't really make any difference. So that's perfectly fine. So I want to say hi to all the X chromosomes around. I think Marianne would appreciate that too.
She would, and just so you know, Stefano knows from what he's saying because he's a microbiologist. So this isn't just casual talk here.
I'd like to just add something. I was going to talk before, but I didn't realize I was on mute. So Carol and Susan, I'm so happy that you included me in this, and I know your mother would really enjoy seeing you girls make one of her favorite soups. Marianne and I played tennis together when we were young. And one of the things, oh, here's Jeannie, say hello.
Jeannie.
Hi, Carol.
Hey, oh my goodness, I haven't seen you.
Go on, Mom. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
All right.
And we used to, no, what was I going to say? Oh, yes. When you girls were young, we would go to the park together. And your mother was always such a multitasker. She would always be doing many things at the same time. And even though you girls might be playing, she'd bring her sewing or whatever. And one of the most exciting things about her was the amount of energy she had. I know that she had to be at the gym at 8 o'clock every morning. And then she scheduled that time so she could have time in her Play-Doh group and studying. And then I know with you ladies with the cooking group. So she was just a marvel and a really fantastic role model. And I'm so pleased to also see two of the grandchildren here, Marissa and Julia. And Marissa, you met my granddaughter in Houston, because your grandmother and I talked about the fact that you were doing an internship or something then, and you met my granddaughter Danielle, and she came home with very sweet stories about you. Told me that everybody thought you were such a fine young woman. So, so that was good. And they were doing a project, I think, like this when there was a hurricane in Houston, or I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, KindWorks would appreciate. We volunteered at a day camp during Hurricane Harvey, taking care of kids whose families had to rebuild their homes at the time.
That was it. Yes.
Your granddaughter's wonderful. That's so nice to make the connection. It's great to meet you.
Yes, it's nice. It's nice to see you and Carol and Susan. And I loved your mom. She was just, it's so hard to accept that she's not here. And this is a beautiful tribute to her. So thank you for including me.
As long as I happen to be here, can I just say something?
Oh, please, Jeannie.
You know, my mom and I go to the theater, which obviously we haven't been able to do for quite some time.
Is that you, Jeannie, talking?
That's me talking, yes. And your mom joined us at the theater a number of times. So I actually, even though I hadn't seen her in years, I think I saw her when my dad died. She came over here to the house, which was wonderful. Part of that was wonderful, obviously. And then I got to see her a few times at the theater, and it was really, really nice. It was just so nice to have a longtime friend back in Mom's life, and therefore back in my life. And she was always so put together. It was just, you know, even my husband, who, you know, doesn't make those kinds of comments about anyone because he doesn't look at clothing or any, I mean, he just is like, he commented how always so well dressed and put together she was. And it was just so nice to see her so fashionable and always ready to go out somewhere nice with Mom.
Yeah.
So it was really, it was a treat. It was a treat. And I offer my condolences to all of you on your loss.
Yeah.
And it's good to see you.
It's great to see you. Charlene and Jeannie, we go back, I mean, probably when Jeannie and I were not even talking yet, our family.
Right? I think so.
Right? So this is such a treat to see you. And to that point, I mean, my mother, you know, lived in several different places over the course of her life. She started out in New York City, and then she and my dad moved to Minnesota when he did his residency, and then they moved to California. And she has friends from every walk of life that she has kept up with through the years. She has a friend from elementary school that her, you know, was still in touch with for her entire life. And she really was that kind of person. She just, you know, was so easy to connect to and made such an effort to connect to people. So I really am grateful that she, you know, taught us that was what you do, that's the kind of thing that one can do in life. And it really, I mean, KindWorks is all about establishing new connections with people. And my mother would really exemplify that.
She did. Yeah.
So, and to Charlene's point about how my mother would have loved to be here, she would laugh at this and she would not agree with it or believe it, but I think she is here in some spiritual way that my mother was the least spiritual person in the world. So that's why I'm saying she would laugh at this. I mean, she was an atheist and she was not, but to me, I feel her presence, not in any supernatural way, but in just a connection way. And she would understand that and would love that. So
I think so. I think so. That's great.
So everybody, I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes wrapping up the soup part of this and then invite Carol and Susan and all their family members to stay on while the rest of us log off so that if they just want to visit, they can have the space for themselves. But what we're going to do now is just finish up our soup. If you guys have questions about how to donate the soup, there were some suggestions in the chat over and above all the locations listed on our website. So remember, you're going to want to use KindSoup labels because that gives people comfort that you're part of a group and not just some freak who's like giving somebody food and they don't know who you are. So use our labels and let them know that you're part of a KindSoup donation. Give to anybody who you feel like sharing your soups with, but also including food assistance providers. There are so many people who are food insecure now. If you live near us, then we've listed some food assistance providers in the DMV area around Washington, DC. But there's also, and I put in the chat and I will put it on the website, a church near Wayne, Pennsylvania that will be accepting soups from now on. So you can join us on any KindSoup Saturday and know that they will accept your soups and get them to people in need. And also, as mentioned at the beginning and was on the chat, feel free to get onto your neighborhood listserv or your next door in your neighborhood and ask if people are not feeling well and they're stuck home, either fighting COVID or just, getting through the days and looking for some, and you think this might be a nice way to give them a little love and support. I did that this morning and it worked out beautifully. So there's a million ways to share your soup. Make sure that you use labels, make sure that you share your soup, and then please make sure to check on our website for the little brief survey that we call contact tracing for the Kindemic, and report into us where you donate or share your soup. We love to hear the stories. Anybody else who has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Our soups are just about done now. And as I said, it's been a thrill to celebrate Marianne along with her family and friends. But I think maybe we'll just give them all the Zoom space as we approach 6 o'clock. And
one last question, Deb.
Yep, go ahead, Salma.
Wanted to ask, did Marianne especially like to support? Are there particular causes or issues that she was she supported strongly?
There were a couple, and others feel free to chime in. The two that I think of most prominently are one is Planned Parenthood. She was really a fierce advocate of women and women's rights, and always a strong supporter of that organization. And then another one, particularly in later years, it was St. Jude's Research Hospital for Children. She herself was a longtime cancer survivor, and also her profession and probably greatest passion involved children and helping children. So, trying to help sick children was very, very much within her world and in her thoughts. And so those are sort of the two that come to my mind. But Susan, Julia, Mary, Marissa, and anyone else, Kay, that have thoughts about this?
I think you got it. Very well said. Yes.
She was also a patron always of the arts and of museums. So she was a member of many of the organizations that were around her locally in Los Angeles, as well as other, amazingly other organizations just in places where her family was or where she liked to visit. So she was very interested in supporting the arts as well.
Great point.
She also just loves current events and being informed. So if you just read the newspaper or get passionate about an issue, like that will live her legacy. I think she loved that.
Yeah, and she did always want.
This has been so delightful and fun. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kay. Thank you. I was just going to add, she always wanted to know what you thought, whoever the you was in her world at that moment. She always wanted to hear your views, your thinking. I was thinking about current events, but she was very directed toward whoever was in the room with her, and always made you feel like you were everything to her at that moment, and you were.
Another charity that my mother gave to ardently all her life was the Alzheimer's Foundation. I think her biggest fear was that she was going to lose her cognitive abilities, because that's what she watched happen to her mother. And so we have been supporting Alzheimer's research in our family for a very long time. And Michael and I are supporting the Alzheimer's research being done at Brown also. They have a really active program there. And I know my mother, even though she was blessed and so happy that despite what she did have, her physical problems, that her mind stayed really sharp to the end. I mean, minus a few nightmares here and there. She really did not have that kind of problem. And she felt very blessed and feels very badly for the people that have had to suffer that way. So that would be another charity. And then just finishing up with the soup, it has taken a very long time for my soup to reach a boil, I think just because the volume is so much. But it is slowly boiling, so I added the cornstarch, which is what I do at the end. And then now I'm kind of ready to do the egg drop thing. So here's my eggs, 2 eggs scrambled up in my cup. And what I do, and you want to do this with very hot soup. So if your soup for whatever reason isn't very hot, wait and do it later. But all I'm going to do is just pour the egg like this into the soup. And then don't pour it all at one time. Stir it up. And what you should see are those nice, pretty little swirls. I told Judy to make sure her granddaughter Dahlia sees this, because I just think part of the fun of cooking is making something look different from whatever you started with. And maybe I liked it because it was sort of like chemistry as well. So now the soup will have a totally different look to it once, if you have put in the egg. I know some of you are not, but that's how you do it. And you just keep stirring it and adding the egg. And let me say, for any of our people on this that are in my area, I am happy and going to pick up soup, any soup you want to make or donate, and bring it to Wayne. Carol actually, or the other possibility, which Francis has made available to me, is working through a woman here, Amy Rubin. It's just that I haven't gotten an actual specific drop-off information from her. So whatever way, I will pick up your soup and I will get it to a shelter or a food distribution place. So just let me know. I don't know if all of you have made soup for donation or you were just making it for your family. So I'm not going to call you. You just text me. If you would like me to come by, I will come by sometime tomorrow and pick it up. So please, you don't need to freeze it. I have assurances that it can be consumed within this week. And that's what I was hoping for, because I have never frozen this soup, so I don't really know. My sister is much better at this stuff than I am. I just always follow the recipe. So that's all I had to say. And thank you so much, all of you, for participating.
Thank you, everybody. Just a last thought I want to say, the recipe does call for sprinkling scallions on for garnish. Again, if you're bringing it to a place for donation, that's a piece you probably will need to skip for that part. But I did want to show, I went this week to pick up some herbs from my nursery, because my mother, another thing that she really loved and was so proud of was the herbs and the lemons that she grew in her home. And when she came out to visit us all those many times, as Cheryl Israel pointed out, she always would pack in her suitcase. She literally came loaded with lemons and fresh herbs from her garden. And she was always so proud that she could do that. So I have my chives that I will plan on using for the portion of the soup that we're going to eat here. And that will make me especially thoughtful about her, because she always loved to do that. So.
And for anybody else, I just use scallions because I don't know, they seem more bulky with this many vegetables in the soup. And I have put them into the soup and left them there, not just use them as a garnish. And it does work if you want to. I mean, it's meant to be a garnish, but if you serve it and you have leftover scallions, no problem. Just put it in the fridge. The whole thing keeps scallions and all, again, for a week. So very easy recipe.
I'm pleased to report that the soup is amazing, number one. And number two, if you do use egg replacement instead of egg, it works out great.
Oh, good. So you got swirling with that, Cheryl?
Yes, I got chewy, the equivalent of like an egg white consistency, chewy drops that worked out great.
Okay, great to know. All right. So, and I'll just say a word for my daughters. They would have been here if they could. They are both in Mexico right now and don't have any cooking ability. So they would have been here, and they send their regards to their cousins, their aunt, and everyone else. So thank you. Okay.
I'm going to turn off the Zoom recording, and this space is now yours. I'm going to just mute me, and you guys can just stay on as long as you want. I'll close this up. Thank you so much.
Everybody, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was lovely.